For the first several months of ministry and traveling, I was really just feeling my way around and trying to understand how to do what I would do through my singing and sharing. There was not a great deal of sharing. I didn't feel as though I had much to share because I'm a whippersnapper. And I was not having trouble getting invitations because, you see, at the church, there was an organization called the Institute for Successful Church Leadership that would have these big conferences 4 times a year. And because I was a significant person on campus as far as the ministry was concerned and the television, I was part of those programs. And there'd be 300 to 400 pastors from churches all over the country every 3 months. And so during these 4 days of conference, they would get to know me as a singer, but also as a worship leader, and in following up to them and saying, God's got me in this ministry, and if you feel as though we could be of value in your church community, please call, be happy to do that. We do not charge. We would go out on an offering basis, whatever your church would do to support us, that would be good. We'd like you to help us share in the transportation costs, but other than that, I intentionally said, I don't want to put fee on ministry. God should be in charge of my financial life too. And so he's in charge, and there would be some times when we'd come out with some pretty skinny offerings. There'd be other times where there would be surprisingly large offerings. I drove the van. I had a Shure Vocal Master system with 4 or 5 foot high column speakers and a big amplifier with 6 channels, I think, and a cassette player. And I would come into the church. I would carry all the stuff in myself. I would carry all my record products in myself. And we would set up a table, like a card table size, on the platform where I would stand next to it. And I had 1 song per cassette for tracks. And I would sing live to these recordings. I'd have them all cued, and I'd push the go button, and the track would come on, and I'd sing, and I'd eject it, and I'd put the other cassette in, and I'd push the button and go, and I'd sing, and that's what I was doing.
It's as though I already know you from somewhere down the line, 'cause any friend of the Father is a good friend of mine.
And after the service, I would leave the sound system up, and I'd go out into the lobby and be there at the product table and sell product and talk with people and sign autographs and do all that kind of stuff. And then when they were gone, I'd go back in and I'd tear down the sound system and carry it back out into the van and go to the next place and start all over again. It was about time to make another album, and so my next album was called A Brand New Song, and I had Ron do the orchestrations. I produced it, and we did it through Manna Music that's owned by Hal Spencer. And we did more Ron Harris tunes, along with a couple of hymns.
I remember a shirt that I gave to my dad that was striped, and I remember him wearing it for the cover of an album, and I was so proud that I'd gotten him that shirt, and that he was actually wearing it, and it was on an album.
Where have you been? Where are you going? What is your life coming to?
But I was doing everything, and I was starting to I think I need some help. I didn't have much money to pay, but I thought, wouldn't it be good if I had a sound assistant who would set up, tear down, and I'd take care of all the other things. And I don't remember quite how I came to the decision I made, but I remembered that one of my students, by the name of Michael Killen, had interest in sound equipment and things like that.
I remember coming home one day in January 1976, and my mother said, you got a call from Mr. Frank. He wants you to call him back. I said, Mr. Frank called? What does he want? She said, I don't know. So I called him up, and he said something like, hey, Killen, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm just kind of going to school and, working. I was working at Knott's Berry Farm. And he said, you want a job? I said, wow. I said, well, can I get back to you? I wasn't really sure if I should do something like this. I thought, well, I can't leave school. And I said, well, let me call you back. So I remember a couple days later I called Mr. Frank and I said, I'd really like to do this.
We came to an agreement that he would travel with me. I to this day feel as though I must not have paid him very much. I didn't have much to pay him.
So that's how I started working for Mr. Frank, who would then now become Fred. I made the transition from Mr. Frank to Fred by beginning my work with him as his sound man and driver. Once I took the job, I drove over to Fred's apartment. I think he lived in Orange at the time, and I said, well, here I am, and what are we going to be doing? And he said, well, we're going to be driving this. And it was a Volkswagen panel van. It was pretty bare bones. The first place I drove the van to was to Portland, Oregon. And I remember Fred just saying, here's the van, here's a Chevron credit card, see you in Portland in 2 days.
But he went with me. We had good experiences. I felt as though the addition of a sound person really helped the ministry because it freed me up to not have to be, Mr. Do Everything.
And I remember setting up the sound system for the first time, and I'd never even done a show with Fred before. We hadn't rehearsed anything. I just set up the sound system. He had a mic. He had all of his tracks on cassette, and I had all that set up to go. And I knew how to do all that stuff. I felt pretty confident about that. But I had no idea what was actually going to happen in the program. And I thought, well, he's going to sing a bunch of songs, and it's going to be one song after another. I wasn't prepared for the fact that what he was doing was he would sing a song, and he would just stop and he'd just start talking to the people. He would start sharing with people what he was feeling and what his journey was. It was much different than I expected, and I realized right away, I thought, wow, this could be interesting.
Sharing is something that isn't always easy for me to do, especially if it's honest sharing. If it's intimate, it can be difficult.
And so I developed a technique that for me I thought worked. When I would come to a new church, if it was a concert situation, I would intentionally sing 1 or 2 short up-tempo tunes. They might be familiar to them. And then I would stop, and in essence I would say, hi, I'm Fred Frank. I was born and raised in Anaheim. I'm the second of 4 boys. My mom and dad encouraged us to go to church, and I learned a lot about church, but I never became a Christian until I was 39 years old. And I would talk about something that was real in my life right now that displayed vulnerability. And here was my mode of operation. Until that person believes that I'm real, he's a spectator. How can I help pull him, prompt him to stop being a spectator? Because that's when genuine ministry will take place. Otherwise, he's examining.
And I came to a simple decision that I needed more than just me in my life, and I simply asked Jesus to come into my heart, to come into my life, to come into my attitude. Because when he comes into my attitude, it changes me. Now, you've heard this before. I'm not saying anything new, but you know what's interesting? Sometimes the Lord will take something that you've heard many, many, many times, and then finally it's like, aha, I got it.
That was really interesting to observe because I got to see him start at one point and move along into to the point where he really was very, very open on stage. But watching him do it was really watching somebody be very, very courageous. He was very courageous in what he did.
And so I want to share tonight, and I want to share through fellowshipping and of myself, but I want you to really listen closely to words tonight, and I can share the love of the Lord in a very special way. Listen closely tonight. Would you? Say yes.
There were times I'd laugh at, I want to say, stop talking and sing. But now I realize that that was one and the same thing. As Fred shared, the song communicated one thing, but he would tell a story leading up to the song. He would let you into his life and all that. So the whole thing was choreographed. I don't think he even thought of it that way. So the two were really one now as I reflect on that. For him, very important.
And now I can sing with pride in my song. I'm singing of things that were there all along. I'm feeling the strength that was given to me. Jesus was there all the time. Jesus was there all the
I would share something. I might say, you know, I'm going to tell you something about me that some of you will ruffle your feathers, and I know that. And I'm not here to ruffle your feathers, but I want you to know that the pain that came into my life that brought me to Christ was divorce. Is that right? No. I was taught that's wrong. That's not what I like. It's not what I think should happen in a life, but it happened to me. However, it brought me to Christ too.
You know, pain drives you. It's going to do one or two things to you. It's going to drive you away from God or into the arms of God. And Fred's one of those people that drove him deeper into the arms of God. Now, does that mean he didn't have questions and have struggles? We all do. Does that mean all the answers came easy? They never do. But Fred kept pursuing and never quitting.
When I first heard this next song, I just cracked up because I knew that there'd be some people that never would hear more than the first line that says, Jesus gets me down. I said, Jesus, it gets me down. When life has got me up a tree, Jesus gets me down.
The other thing that's interesting is that we would do a concert and then there'd be a love offering or a collection, and we'd be literally driving away in the Volkswagen. I'd be driving maybe, and Fred would be counting the collection. I didn't know it, but he was really living very close to the bone.
You can be sure he was no Robin Hood.
There was no exchange of money at the concert. So people would come to a product table afterwards and say, I want this and this and this. We would say, please fill out this form so we can know who you are and we can inform you of other items, but we're doing this on a faith basis. And here's your receipt. This is what it would sell for if we were going to put a price on it. And we would find that some people would never pay. We would find that some people would pay too much. But oftentimes people would send a note that was very, very encouraging to keep it up.
'Cause Jesus gets me down, Jesus gets me down. When life has got me up a tree, Jesus gets me down, Jesus gets me down, Jesus gets me down. When life has got me up a tree, Jesus gets me down.
Sometimes you go to a little town where it looks like maybe 50 people live there. And I was scheduled to do a concert in a little town in Iowa, and the church was out in the middle of nowhere. There was no town. It was just out in the middle of all these farms. And it was a big church, and I thought, what is this? That place was packed on a Wednesday night.
Near the end of that first tour, we arrived at Jesse Jackson's church, the Operation Push headquarters in Chicago.
I had been singing in the church in Our Power one Sunday when the pulpit guest was a fellow by the name of Jesse Jackson. And Jesse must have liked what I did. He said, would you please come and sing for our church?
And it was an amazing crowd. The energy was unbelievable, this incredible choir. And I was on stage mixing Fred's portion of the program, which was going out live over the radio. It was just, I thought, wow, this is great.
But I remember standing in this big pulpit, Jesse Jackson just off here to my left behind me, and as I'm beginning to sing, he starts talking at me. Sing it, brother. Yes, amen. And he's goading me. That's what I would call that. Well, it was bothering me. It was distracting me. And during an instrumental interlude, I'd say, be quiet. Now, he was fine, and there was no problem, but I'm probably the only white guy in the world that has ever asked Jesse Jackson to shut up in his own pulpit.
We went all over the country. It was something I'd never expected, and I loved it. And in between tours, I would take other jobs, you know, because I had to work other places, because Fred wasn't constantly touring. And so I remember Fred calling and asking if I could go on a tour, and I said, well, you know, I've got this job now. I don't think I can go. And he said, okay. And he hired, this is when he hired Benny.
I had a man by the name of Benny who would help me in the ministry. And one night after the service, a fellow came up to Benny and said, "What is Fred Frank's last name?" I guess that makes sense. Would you like to know what Benny said? Say yes. Benny said, Furter, which would make me Fred Frank Furter. Benny doesn't work for me anymore. We're good friends still, though.
Fred and I were in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, doing a concert, and this coal mining town. And we were walking down the street, and two middle-aged ladies were walking towards us, approached us, and stopped in their tracks. They were just like starstruck, and they pointed at Fred, and their fingers were shaking, and they looked at him, and the only words that came out of their mouth were, TV, because they recognized Fred from Hour of Power. Fred very graciously stopped and talked to them and, you know, invited them to come to the concert and everything. Of course, they were planning on it. And from that day on, Fred, with me, has always had the nickname, and my family know him as TV. Yes, I remember we were in South Bend, Indiana, and it just so happened that Billy Graham was giving a crusade at Notre Dame. And so Fred and I went. Now, Fred, because of his connections, was able to go backstage. I had really good seats though, and that was an awesome experience.
CBN presents the 700 Club.
Fred got a call from 700 Club, and they wanted him to come out east and perform a song. And he approached me if I would like to accompany him. Now, I was a guitarist, but he and I had never performed together. And it was a particular song that required a 12-string guitar. That's what kind of accompaniment he wanted. So I was able to procure a nice 12-string, and we went back east. It was an exciting moment to be able to perform with him and to be on that show.
I'd like to sing you a song. I hope you won't think it wrong. This song for you is all I have left to give. This simple song to let you know how I feel. So I'll sing this song for you. I'll sing this song for you.
And that was all very exciting because they put us up in a nice hotel, and they picked us up in a nice car, and they drove us to their nice studios in Virginia Beach, and met Pat Robertson and Ben and everybody who you see on the 700 Club were there.
Pat would bring me in frequently for fundraisers.
You call, if the lines are busy at any time, be patient and call back in. We want to hear from you. And right now, we're going to hear from Fred Frank to get things started.
What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. And oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. Have we trials and temptations? Is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Can we find a friend so faithful who will all our sorrows share? Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Take it to Him in prayer. And after you've shared your real feelings, listen, because there's a message from God to us.
Did a lot of these programs, and the people were nice and all, but I don't think it did anything for my Christian music career. That wasn't the intention anyway, but I was never too much set on becoming rich or famous, and God accommodated me. I didn't become rich or famous.
And I would love to have you know who this gentleman is. His name is Rob Woyshner.
Fred and I went to high school together. He was my teacher, and then I went away to school. And I think we got reacquainted when I came back. First time I'd seen Fred, or it was Mr. Frank at first. And I was playing a wedding. I'd been back at Juilliard, and I came back and I was playing a wedding. It was about 5 minutes before the wedding. And I'm thinking, who's the soloist? Nobody knew. I'm thinking it's Aunt Hildegard, somebody, and they're gonna come in with a wrinkled piece of music, and I'm getting a little nervous, and I started thinking, oh well, it's gonna be a disaster, but it'll be okay. And in walked Mr. Frank, and I said, oh, and he looked at me and he went, oh. Gave me this piece of music, it was a chord chart, and sort of like blah blah blah, good luck, and here we go. We played and had a great time, and he did great, and I did okay, and he came back afterward and he says, so what have you been doing? And we shared a few things, and then Fred said, you've really learned to improvise and play chord charts, because I was a classical guy. And I looked at him and I said, well, you've learned to sing on pitch. And we sort of hit it off from there. You know, he told me what he was doing, and I told him what I was doing, and he says, well, let's get together and play some. You know, like just start out, and that's how it all started with him and I getting together. So it must have been like 83 or 84 that we actually started doing things for 12 years. So it was quite a bit of a time. And it was a transition from the tracks to playing with the tracks to piano, and then he kept incorporating more of these story songs into it, and we grew that way.
Sitting by the window praying, waiting for the break of day. Sitting by the window praying, waiting to hear what the Lord might say.
Began doing story songs. There's a composer by the name of Ken Miedema who has written a lot of very clever material. And I would take some of these Bible story songs and I would dramatize them. I would play the part of Moses and God and the narrator, and I would play Ananias or Saul, and I would play Zacchaeus and all these different characters depending upon what that piece of material was about.
Went back to sitting by the window praying, waiting for the break of day. Sitting by the window praying, waiting to hear what the Lord might say. Sitting by the window praying, oh, waiting for the break of Ananias.
And they were kind of entertaining, but they were all Bible-based, and when it came down to the end of the song, it's obvious that this was not supposed to be entertainment. This was about bringing a biblical message through the song.
But the Moses one was really good because it talks about what do you hold in your hand today, Moses? What, give it to God, throw it down, let it go. It has a really great ending.
Old Moses, way back there in the wilderness, saw some smoke and came to the bush, and the bush was burning. The Lord says, take off your shoes, Moses, you're on holy ground. Moses, I've chosen you to be my man. Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Moses, I've chosen you to work for me. Moses, you're gonna set my people free. Not me, Lord.
But then at the end, it was just so beautiful at the end because it would challenge you. I often think of that thing. What do you hold in your hand? What's bothering you? Let it go.
Give it up. Let it go. Throw it down.
Fred chose his music. He took a lot of time in picking what he wanted to do, and then working on the arrangement, and then adapting it. I mean, it was a long process. It wasn't a matter of just playing the notes. When we rehearsed, rehearsal with Fred was not easy. It was not an easy thing, because he would hear something he'd want. It wasn't written that way, and then he'd try to explain it, and he'd play it sort of like the way he wanted it, but it had to have a certain amount of freedom, and you had to speed up here. It was like a Puccini opera, So I would be taking notes, and then he goes, okay, let's do it again. Okay, let's do it again. It had to be this way, or else it didn't communicate.
Well, my songs of praises turned to fear, because some began to boo and cheer, and others followed up this leader's angry words. But then Jesus stood to make reply, and fire was flashing in his eye, and when he spoke, the faintest breathing could be heard.
I would guess over the next 15 years, I would have as many as perhaps 150 appearances a year. Weekends, mostly concerts, maybe 120 of them were concerts, maybe 130. And then I began doing church choir seminars where I would come out to a church and work with their choir or a group of choirs from the community and spend all day with them on a Saturday and break the conference down into this seminar into 3 parts. And it all boiled down to one thing, and that is, you may sing well and you may be incredible musicians, but if it's not in your heart what you're singing about, you're only performing. So what can I do to help you to not only understand the importance of knowing in your heart what the message is about, but then just honestly conveying it? So that's what the seminar was about. And between seminars and concerts and services and things like that, so I was very, very busy.
It's as though I already know you from somewhere down the line. 'Cause any friend of the Father is a good, good friend. A good, good friend. You are good, good friends of mine. Friends